Està bé, no?
Hola, se'm sent bé? Bona tarda a tothom. Primer de tot, gràcies per venir, per ser aquí en aquesta tarda plujosa. Gràcies també a l'equip del CCCB Debats per organitzar aquest cicle de xerrades que comença avui i gràcies també a la Sira Abenoza i al Daniel Gamper per accedir a compartir el seu temps i les seves idees en el debat d'avui i gràcies també especialment al professor Hartmut Rosa per ser avui aquí amb nosaltres i perquè, a més, en contra del que podria semblar després d'aquest una mica més d'any i pico a través de la pandèmia i aquesta idea de desumificació de les relacions, que sembla que lluny d'alliberar-nos d'alguna manera de la pressió per estar sempre disponibles, el que ha acabat fent ha sigut intensificar-ho. Per tant, sobretot, estar doblement agraït per al temps i la bona disposició de ser avui aquí. Crec que en conferències com aquestes, amb figures de la talla de Hartmut Rosa, calen poques presentacions, de manera que intentaré ser el més breu possible i ja deixar pas a la conferència, però sí que començaré una mica amb les formalitats curriculars, perquè Hartmut Rosa és filòsof i sociòleg, catedràtic de l'Institut de Sociologia de la Universitat Friedrich Schiller de Jena i director del Max Weber Center for Advanced Cultural and Social Studies d'Erfurt. Rosa ha treballat també amb altres institucions tan prestigioses com la New School for Social Research de Nova York i ha estat mereixedor de nombrosos premis, entre ells els més recents, el Premi d'Assaig Tractatus de 2016 i el Premi Erich Fromm de 2018. Com molts ja sabreu, el professor Rosa és internacionalment conegut per les seves aportacions en el camp de la sociologia del temps i, en particular, per la seva interpretació de la modernitat a través del concepte d'acceleració social. Amb els seus escrits, Hartmut Rosa ha contribuït a entendre una dinàmica estructural del nostre present com és l'experiència d'escassetat temporal, és a dir, de la pressa, la urgència i la velocitat creixent que sembla cobrir totes les facetes de la nostra existència. Però a la vegada, i crec que és important assenyalar-ho, encara que sigui molt breument en aquesta introducció, els estudis sociològics de Rosa també han ajudat a establir una relació crítica amb aquelles interpretacions més o menys reduccionistes que tracten l'acceleració social com el producte simple del creixement econòmic i del desenvolupament tecnològic, és a dir, com si aquests seguissin una lògica determinista i un desenvolupament gairebé històric inevitable. Per Rosa, en canvi, l'acceleració tecnològica no és la causa única de l'acceleració social i cultural, sinó que defensa una relació, que és com a mínim bidireccional i multicausal, entre els canvis infraestructurals de les societats i les transformacions en la nostra manera d'estar en el món, és a dir, de la nostra relació amb l'espai, el temps i els altres. Avui el professor Rosa ens parlarà de les idees que ha articulat en el seu últim llibre, que es titula Lo indisponible i que acaba de ser publicat a l'editorial Herder, en castellà, a partir del que crec que podrem entendre millor aquesta obertura del concepte d'acceleració cap a altres dimensions socials, culturals, institucionals, a més d'econòmiques i tecnològiques. La hipòtesi de la qual parteix a Lo indisponible és que una societat és moderna quan només pot estabilitzar-se de manera dinàmica, és a dir, quan necessita el creixement constant a nivell econòmic, l'acceleració constant a nivell tècnic i la innovació constant a nivell cultural, però ja no per avançar i créixer desmesuradament, sinó per mantindre el que ell anomena el seu status quo institucional. Així, aquest imperatiu de creixement ha fet que la modernitat tracti el món com un punt d'agressió, és a dir, com una realitat que ha de ser coneguda, explorada, conquistada, apropiada i dominada, o per dir-ho amb el concepte de Hartmut Rosa, una realitat que ha de ser posada a disposició. No obstant això, en aquest procés de tornar disponible o de fer disponible el món, sorgeixen moltes i noves formes d'indisponibilitat, que fan que aquest impuls d'acceleració i creixement constant no sigui mai unívoc ni segueixi un procés unidireccional. I és justament a partir d'aquestes experiències d'indisponibilitat que Hartmut Rosa va descrivint i plantejant en el seu llibre que ofereix una crítica a la modernitat i ho fa des d'una posició més o menys pessimista, com ell resumeix i reconeix al final del llibre, però tot i així acaba proposant una manera d'obrir nous horitzons i nous imaginaris polítics a partir del concepte de ressonància, que és un concepte que ell ha desenvolupat en detall en el seu llibre Resonancia, una sociologia de la relación con el mundo, i que suposo que avui tindrem l'oportunitat de discutir llargament. Finalment, i ja acabo aquesta introducció, per aprofundir, qüestionar, ampliar i discutir totes aquestes idees que trobem en el llibre, avui aquí tenim la professora i doctora en filosofia Sira Abenoza, que actualment és directora de la Casa dels Clàssics i de l'Institut for Socratic Dialogue, a través del qual impulsa el diàleg socràtic com a eina d'inclusió i promoció de la justícia, i comptem també amb el Daniel Gamper, professor, assagista i doctor en filosofia, que dedica la seva recerca a l'àmbit de la filosofia política, concretament de les teories de la democràcia, la política i la religió. D'entre les seves moltes publicacions, acadèmiques i no acadèmiques, destaca l'assaig Les mejores palabras, amb el qual va guanyar el Premi Anagrama d'assaig l'any 2019. I ara sí, ja no m'allargo més i dono pas a la intervenció del professor Hartmut Rosa, que intervindrà a través de Zoom, i un cop acabada la conferència començarem amb el debat i obrirem també les preguntes al públic perquè pugueu intervenir de seguida que vulgueu. Per tant, moltes gràcies i fins ara.
No, but now you can hear me. I'm sorry, I did not have the microphone on. You can hear me now? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I do have a problem with the sound backwards, but I'm happy to present my ideas to you right now. I'm very sorry that I cannot be in Catalonia, in Barcelona right now at the CCCB. I was there a few years ago, I think also with Daniel Gamper, and it was really a great experience. The sense I got there is that you really have, and I'm envious of this. It's a very interesting, a very vibrant and a lively place for civic engagement, for exchange of political and cultural sort. And I enjoyed that very much. So I'm very sorry to only be there digitally today, but nevertheless, of course, I'm very grateful for Herder and the CCCB to set this up. So let me start to briefly present you my main ideas on the problem we are facing, right? Which is in my new book, which just has appeared with the Herder editorial, Lo Indisponible. And it's about it is about the idea that something is wrong in the way we interact with the world, so to speak, right? In our relationship to the world in total. What I try to do as a sociologist is to develop a sociology of self-world relationships, right? The question which is driving me is the question about how do we approach life? How do we approach the world and nature, and how do we experience it? And basically, my claim is that modernity, and that means the social formation we live in, right, the social fabric we live in, and which developed from the 18th century onward. You can actually mark quite a clear historical shift around the 18th century. And from then on, I think we follow a program which has a cultural drive, a motivational force, but also a structural side, a structural requirement. And we follow this a logic of or a program of making the world disponible, right? That means visible, accessible, controllable, and usable, so to speak. My idea is this, that a modern society you can really identify by the fact that it is driven by a constant attempt to extend the horizon of what is visible, as I just said, of what is visible, what is accessible, what is controllable, and what is usable. Right? But I also talk sometimes that what we do is trying to extend the horizon of the AAA, of accessibility, of availability, and of attainability, right? And it is important for me to see that, look, if you think of all the modern spheres of life, what they try to do is increase the horizon of lo disponible, or the accessible, the available, and the attainable. Think of science. What do we do in science? We try to push the borders of knowledge. We want to deeper into the universe with telescopes, with satellites, and also with spaceships, right? But we also want to go to pierce deeper into matter with a microscope, right? For example, or actually to look deeper into our body with the endoscope in medicine, right? For example, right? Well, when you think about our colonial history and nowadays tourism, it's the idea of increasing the horizon of what we can make available and attainable and accessible. If you think of the economy, it's the idea of producing wealth in order to give us the means, individual and collective, to make the world attainable, accessible, available. By the way, this program, this idea, this force of trying to expand the horizon of availability, attainability, and accessibility is also on the individual side, right? We think this is what makes our life better. It's actually what defines our understanding of the quality of life. We tend to think that our life is a good life when we increase the horizon of l'eau disponible, right? For example, this is why we are keen on money, why people think that money is important, because if you have a lot of money on your bank account, right, then you can afford the expensive car or the nice flat in the best area of Barcelona, for example, or the trip to India, or whatever it is, right? Or the expensive watch and whatever it is. So money, or actually you could say that your bank account tells you your horizon of availability, attainability, and accessibility. But I think it's also the driving force, for example, of technology. I mean, when you think of the history of technology, again, you can look at it from the collective side, social, historical development, but you can also look at your individual experience. For example, when you were a kid, or maybe you're a parent and you can observe it with your small kids right now, learning to ride the bike and getting your first bike is such an important step, and you experience it most often as as an element of happiness. And why is it? Because with the help of the bike, you extend the horizon of what you can, of where you can go to by yourself, right? When I got my first bike, I could ride to the little lake outside the village, right? And then when I turned 15, I got the moped, the small one, right? The small mopeds, the mofa, the motorbike. And with the help of that, my world literally increased. I could reach the neighboring village. It wasn't too much fun to go there because we got beaten up, but nevertheless, it was fun I had a larger world, and everyone dreamt of turning 18 because then you could get a car and get the driver's license, and that meant it was almost an explosion of my horizon of where I could go to from my village. I could drive even to Berlin or so, or at least to Freiburg, the next big city, on Friday night to the disco or the concert or whatever it was. And then the airplane, of course, again, vastly expands the horizon of my availability, attainability, and accessibility. And it's the same even nowadays. Look, with the smartphones. I mean, our society, our culture is hooked on these things. Why? Because they led to an explosion of the horizon of l'eau disponible, right? I have all my friends just one click away. I have all the knowledge that has ever been digitalized one click away, right? All the books, there are huge libraries. It's all 2 clicks. All the music that has been recorded, it's just 2 clicks away. I can now watch Russia TV or Chinese TV or Japanese TV just with 2 clicks, and all my friends and family are 2 clicks away. So I've made them all available, accessible, or disponible with this technology. So you see, there is this kind of cultural driving force is expanding the horizon of l'eau disponible, of the available, the attainable, and the accessible. But there is also a structural necessity. Right, I started with science and the economy, and actually even with politics or law. What are they trying to do? They try to regulate social life and to make it predictable. That's another way of trying to make the world controllable, and by that available and accessible and disponible, right? I can predict, I have a right to some things, or I can predict what will happen in the course of the next 90 minutes and so on. So there is a cultural attractivity of this program, trying to control the world, make it available, attainable, accessible. But there's also structural necessity. And this is how I define a modern society. A modern society can be defined as a society which needs to constantly accelerate, innovate, and grow in order to keep its institutional structure, right? The economic structure, but also the healthcare system, the educational system, the political system. They all depend on our permanently increasing that horizon, right? It's structurally tied to this logic of expanding the horizon of the knowable and the visible and the controllable and the usable. So a modern society is structurally forced to permanently expand that horizon. And now, but I think there is a number of problems connected with this, right? On the one hand, my claim is that this leads to a mode of aggression towards the world, right? We need to control the world all the time. The world is kind of and the world means other people and my own body, for example, or my workplace. They all present themselves to me as like in a mode of aggression. I have to, you see this mode of aggression, for example, on your to-do list. I have to get this done. I have to do this. I have to bring this under control. I have to buy that. I have to fill in this form and so on. So it's a permanent struggle on the individual side, but also on the cultural or social side, because when you look at the way we deal with nature, right, it's a mode of aggression. We have these extractive industries which all the time have to get more from the earth, for example, right, and we pollute the earth, and you feel the aggression on the individual side. But my main claim, and this is what I would like to discuss with you, my main claim that this program of making the world disponible, right, available, attainable, accessible, leads to the opposite. We lose the world. The world recedes strangely. It is turned silent, right? And this process has an outer side and an inner side, right? An outside and an inside. On the outside, and this is where COVID comes in, right? I find it really remarkable that the attempt to make the world predictable, controllable, and so on, to bring it under control, make it disponible, leads to the opposite. We create monsters of indisponibility, lo indisponible, so to speak, right? My favorite example here is our attempt to, or our successful attempt, right, our achievement to split the atom, the nuclear, the core of an atom, right? And when Oppenheimer and his friends managed to do this, they did split the atom from the inside, so to speak. It was the feeling almost of omnipotence. All right, we have become almost creators because we can now kind of direct or control matter from the inside. But this increase of the horizon of the controllable and the usable has led to a monstrous form of indisponibility, which we see in the nuclear explosion. An exploding power station or an exploding nuclear bomb makes us totally powerless, right? We cannot get in resonance with it. We cannot be in touch with it because being in touch with a nuclear explosion means dying. So it feels like we are completely powerless in the face of it. And my claim is that this kind of flip side, this paradoxical relationship between increasing the horizon of the controllable or lo disponible, right, and experiencing powerlessness in return, you can see in our relationship to nature as a whole, because we have come to control nature, to know nature, to use nature at ever better degrees, right, always extending. But when we think of nature nowadays, we think of the thing which we destroy and the thing which might destroy us in climate disaster, right? So again, our near omnipotence, the increase of the horizon of the available, the attainable, and the accessible, has led to a powerlessness, right? We feel helpless in the face of the, let's say, climate disaster. And I could actually go on for hours on this. I believe we see it in politics, where the promise of popular sovereignty, right? In our constitutions, it says all the power is within the people. It comes from the people. This is the promise of omnipotence. Politically, we can command our world. But there is the experience of political powerlessness. Politically, it seems we cannot change much. This is where right-wing populism comes in, right? Because they promise you to take back control and do whatever you want to do. But I believe even on a personal level, this is most interesting. On a personal level, you know, with the smart devices, we have become almost omnipotent. If I have a smart home or a smart car, you can make it hot. You can turn on the heat, you can make it cold, you can turn it down. I can make it bright light, I can make it dark night. I can make play loud music or very soft music, cancel all the noises and so on. But if the remote control fails, I cannot close the window anymore. I cannot open the door. I cannot turn down the heating or turn off the music. I feel completely powerless. You all experience this every day, I believe, when our technological environment fails, right? Then the computer says, just 1 moment, please, 1 moment, please, 1 moment, please, and you can do absolutely nothing. So my claim is our attempt to make the world controllable, to control it, right, and predictable, leads to a paradoxical flip side, right? Our powerlessness. And I believe COVID-19 is the most interesting case for this, right? Because you know, my claim was uncontrollability comes in the form of a monster back to us, right? Like the monster is the nuclear bomb or the failing smart device, right? When I cannot close the window anymore. But COVID is the paradigm case. It's really the epitome, so to speak, and a symptom of the monstrous indisponibility. Because this virus, right, we did not control scientifically. We could not use or control medically. We could not predict politically. We don't know what the effects will be economically. And worse than that, it's totally indisponible to us individually. I cannot see it, I cannot hear it, I cannot feel or smell it, right? It's a monster of non-controllability, right? So I believe it's really this symptom. Something is wrong with our way of dealing, interacting with the world. Our attempt to control, predict, use the world leads to unpredictability, uncontrollability in monstrous terms. And that's the outer side. And one final point, there's also an internal side to it. Once we have made something completely controllable, predictable, usable, it is no longer speaking to us. It actually becomes boring. Right? Think of a personal relationship. If you love someone and you get complete control over that person, she or he is no longer attractive. Right? It's a dead relationship, and that's true with everything. As soon as you have complete control over something, it's no longer desirable. We always desire something that is not completely under control, where there is something beyond our grasp, beyond our reach. And because we permanently increase the horizon of the available, the attainable, we experience increasing forms of alienation when the world does not speak to us. Yes, I have 50 million titles of music available on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever it is, but this might exactly lead to the experience of none of this music seems to be speaking to me, attractive to me. You might have 2,000 friends on Facebook or WhatsApp, but when you're in a personal crisis, you have the feeling, I can't reach out to any one of them, right? This is what I call alienation. And this is a kind of loss of disponibility from the inside, right? You lose what I call resonance, the speaking connection with the world. Resonance is not control over something, but being in touch with something that you do not control, that touches you, and then you answer to the touch with reaching out. You feel self-efficacy and alive in being in touch with something and transformed. So my claim is, when you really think of the moments that make you happy, and when you think of the moments, happy is not a good term, right? When you think of the moments where you have the feeling that being in the world feels right? A good mode of existence. It's a mode of resonance where the two things that are, or the two sides that are in touch, do not control each other. They don't make each other disponible, but they make each other kind of resonant, speaking and listening and being transformed in this process. And this process of resonance is at odds with our attempt of control and increase and optimization. And this is what I think is our cultural crisis right now. And this is why I believe that the COVID crisis we should read as the symptom of that there is something wrong in our mode of existence. There's something wrong in our mode of being in the world. Our leading attempt of increasing the horizon of availability, attainability, and accessibility is leading into a paradoxical way of losing the world ecologically and psychologically. It leads to ecological burn up, so to speak, and to psychological burnout. And this is why I still hope that this crisis might in the end kind of be the starting point for developing a new mode of being in the world. And it wouldn't surprise me if this new mode of being in the world was invented at the CCCB in Barcelona. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thank you.
Moltíssimes gràcies al professor Hartmut Rosa per aquesta introducció fantàstica a la sèrie de conceptes que desenvolupa Lo Indisponible. Hem tingut un petit problema tècnic, em diuen que crec que ell no ens està sentint i mentre ho arreglen, si us sembla, comencem nosaltres a xerrar sobre algunes de les idees que han anat sortint en la intervenció del professor Rosa i que també hem pogut extreure de la lectura d'aquest llibre, que crec que hi ha molts elements interessants que per utilitzar el seu concepte que ressonen en el nostre dia a dia i en aquesta crisi pandèmica que ell també ha citat. I si us sembla, comencem amb el debat i a partir d'aquí ja quan ell es pugui incorporar li podem llançar una mica les preguntes. Jo la primera qüestió que volia plantejar i que us volia llançar per veure què em pensàveu era un concepte relatiu al que ha comentat en la seva intervenció el professor Rosa respecte d'aquest increment constant econòmic, tecnològic, al qual es veuen abocades les nostres societats, que ell associa amb aquesta voluntat de fer el món disponible. I és molt interessant perquè quan ell ho planteja en el llibre utilitza un concepte que apareix moltes vegades, que és el d'estabilització dinàmica, que ell, us llegeixo la definició que dona el llibre, diu una societat és moderna quan només pot estabilitzar-se de manera dinàmica, és a dir, quan necessita el creixement constant, econòmic, l'acceleració tècnica, la innovació cultural, per mantenir el seu status quo institucional, que és a partir d'aquesta idea que em sembla molt potent i em sembla interessant que ell, quan planteja aquest imperatiu de créixer i créixer i créixer, no ho fa associant, per dir-ho així, motivacions psicologistes o per la cobdícia o per un moviment intern del propi capitalisme que, per dir-ho així, porti a voler créixer i créixer, sinó precisament que per això parla d'aquest concepte d'estabilitat, perquè considera que hem arribat en un moment en el qual no podem parar de créixer si no volem tornar enrere. I jo us volia preguntar una mica què us semblava aquest concepte d'estabilitat dinàmica per enfocar aquesta idea de creixement respecte de les nostres societats, com creieu que encaixava també amb altres teories de la modernitat que molts cops no adopten aquesta perspectiva.
Jo d'entrada diria que no crec que sigui un fenomen exclusiu de la modernitat, sinó que la modernitat el que ha fet és accelerar-ho i intensificar-ho. I fonamentalment a partir de tota l'evolució tecnològica que ha crescut de manera exponencial en els darrers segles i sobretot en les darreres dècades. I que això el que ha fet al final és que el ritme de canvi sigui vertiginós i que per tant l'amenaça de l'obsolescència que patim tots sigui constant i omniabarcadora. I aquesta amenaça d'obsolescència la pateixen les empreses que han de sobreviure, la pateix qui adquireix tecnologia o depèn de la tecnologia perquè constantment queda obsoleta, però la patim també els professors perquè el coneixement sembla que queda obsolet cada dia i la patim com a persones. Perquè, i en Rosa en parla de la idea de les apps del Tinder o de tantes altres, aquesta idea que som també mercaderia que pot quedar ràpidament obsoleta. Però jo diria que aquesta pulsió hi ha estat sempre. I l'altre dia pensava, per exemple, en un exemple que em sembla interessant però que ve de lluny, si ho pensem, fa més de 2.500 anys, quan es fa el pas de la tradició oral, o sigui, d'explicar els mites de manera oral i, per tant, de manera inefable, incontrolable, irreproduïble, i es decideix optar per l'escriptura, passar de la tradició oral a l'escrita, que és una manera de controlar i de fer controlable el discurs, irreproduïble, i en algun sentit també de matar-lo, perquè la paraula escrita és menys viva que l'oral. Jo crec que aquí hi ha com un de milers o de milions d'exemples que podríem trobar i hi podem identificar aquesta pulsió. Jo crec que el que ha passat és que, si ho pensem, les persones que han ostentat el poder al llarg de la història, si anem molt enrere, eren poques, no? Però si pensem en avui, en l'inici de les democràcies i en la industrialització, el poder està molt més repartit, malgrat, diguem, la riquesa està concentrada en molt poques mans, etc. A la vegada el poder està molt repartit, és a dir, les lògiques de poder poden ser aplicades i la pressió i l'amenaça d'obsolescència arriben a tot tipus de dimensions, i no només a 4 mans. I llavors jo crec que aquesta lògica que inicialment estava concentrada en poques mans, que per mi és la lògica de l'home de Hobbes, és a dir, la lògica de l'ésser mogut per la desconfiança, la competència i la glòria, aquest home de Hobbes, que inicialment el podem veure concentrat només en poques mans, que eren les que ostentaven el poder, com que és una lògica per la qual no tenen cap tipus d'incentiu de renunciar-hi, perquè és la lògica que els porta al poder, és una lògica que a la vegada es va instal·lant i instaurant i repartint de manera democràtica, si volem. I aquest home de Hobbes, que inicialment són les poques persones que ostenten el poder, acaba dominant-nos a tots, i tots acabem sent d'alguna manera aquest home de Hobbes, mogut per aquestes pulsions de, malauradament, vull dir, després parlaré d'una cara més lluminosa, però jo crec que tots acabem d'alguna manera embeguts d'aquestes 3 pulsions i això és el que explica que avui estiguem en aquesta situació, però que jo diria que no és una situació nova, sinó que senzillament la trobem en un sentit a nivell exponencial avui gràcies a la tecnologia i a la democratització d'aquestes pulsions.
Penso que m'han dit, perdó, que ja el tenim aquí el professor Hartmut Rosa, no sé si ens sent bé.
Hello.
Hola, hi.
Yeah, I can hear you, and I also heard you I heard what was discussed so far.
Doncs
I could hear everything.
Si vol contestar ja ara, perquè plantejàvem la qüestió de l'estabilització dinàmica i si era un fenomen propi de la modernitat o era més anterior, com plantejava la Sira, si es vol sumar ja al debat.
Yes, very much, because I found this very interesting. Thank you very much for these thoughts. I'd love to discuss it with you in more physical proximity, because on the one hand, I do agree with what you just said, namely on what you said between writing and the narratives. That's something I always tell people, or I tell myself, that when I think back in the previous ages when the writing was invented, I probably would have said, oh, writing is killing as you said, right, the narrative, the lively exchange, because when you tell a story, you can really resonate with it, right? It fits the context, and it's an exchange between people. And probably I would have said, but if you read it in a book, then it's a fixed story, and you do it individually, and so on. So I agree with you that this. If you look at it in civilizational development, the attempt to control the world was did historically develop. But there is one absolutely important difference, and there I would insist that it is something new, and it starts in the 18th century, because if you look at the development of technology, right, sometimes there were 10,000 or even 100,000 years of non-innovation, no crucial innovation in between. And when you look at the reasons, I mean, it is true. People always, not always, but from time to time, they invented something new. They sometimes invented something new because there was a change in the climate, for example. You can really see historically or ethnologically, innovations very often were the result of changing conditions, when it got warmer or colder, for example, or when some materiality was getting scarce or was running out, or when there was an enemy approaching. Sometimes it was the result of human curiosity. Someone invented something, and then the society changed. But societies, as we know in the past, or human communities, actually rather tended to repress innovation. I'm referring to Claude Lévi-Strauss, who distinguished between hot and cold societies. And then when you look at it, then you really see that actually all the societies we know, at least from what I know, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Incas, the Mayas in the Americas, right? They all were societies who had a sense of how things should be done, and they tried to preserve that. And in a modern society, the innovations are not the result of an external change in the environment or a pressure from the enemy. They become a structural necessity, right? In order to stay exactly how we are, we permanently have to innovate every year. And when you look at all the industries, right, and even at the arts and the sciences, we permanently have to push the borders in order to keep our institutional framework. And this, I claim, is really new, right? I mean, when Apple, for example, to take just one example, right, they are not driven by changing the environment or not even by curiosity, but by structural necessity. Next year, they have to have a new iPhone out, right? Because otherwise, they will really be in trouble on the stock market, for example. And this, I think, is a significant change in the way we lead our social and cultural life. So I would not agree with you that it has always been the same and it's just increasing right now.
Sí, jo només sobre això, diguem, sobre si és sobre el procés històric no tinc tant a dir, però sí que m'interessa el vessant existencial. Penso que és, a més, l'element que més apel·la d'aquest llibre és, de fet, jo l'he deixat a un parell de persones que no haurien d'estar especialment interessades ni en sociologia ni en filosofia i n'han sortit molt enriquides perquè efectivament s'hi senten interpel·lats. Aleshores, aquesta estabilització dinàmica a mi m'ha fet pensar en altres sociòlegs com Sennett, per exemple, quan parla de la impossibilitat de crear-se un caràcter o la corrosió del caràcter en algun moment i per tant en aquesta obligació que tenim, parlaves de les obligacions professionals dels professors, però de qualsevol persona menor de 50 anys jo diria que està sotmesa a una constant estabilització dinàmica o sigui, impossibilitat d'estabilització dinàmica perquè ha d'estar constantment aprenent, ha d'estar constantment renovant-se i això ho voldria connectar amb hi ha un element, hi ha un fragment del llibre en el qual parla de com les persones escriuen la seva pròpia biografia i parlen d'aquests moments en els quals et trobes amb una persona que no de manera inesperada o et cau un llibre a les mans. Nietzsche, com parla Nietzsche quan li cau a les mans el llibre de Schopenhauer, i diu, ostres, allò és una absoluta revelació, són coses que no estan previstes. Avui en dia no sé si estàs vides sotmeses constantment a aquest dinamisme inestable, d'altra banda, em pregunto jo quina mena de biografies es poden escriure, perquè són biografies perfectament condicionades no per una cosa que no controlen, sinó per una cosa que els controla a ells, pràcticament. Aleshores, a mi és aquesta perspectiva, diguem-ne, existencial de la proposta que fa Rosa, que fa vostè, que em sembla tan interessant.
Yeah. Do you want me to respond?
Well, it's un comentari.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit. Yeah, I'm not sure but I love to come in on this too. I think it has two sides. One side is really that I mean, you know, I want to I really draw on phenomenology. How do we experience our lives and our way of being in the world and being related to the world? What is missing? I think even now in the Corona crisis, it's very interesting, right? That a lot of people experience now something like, it's like a loss of energy. That's how I like to interpret it, right? That a lot of people report it's like being in apathic, being no longer kind of or lethargic, right? No longer being running out of energy, you could really say. And I think that's because there's a loss of micro resonances, right? We have to be in touch with each other, even to bump in each other, and even to get small kind of, it's not always pleasant, you know, someone talks back at you, someone takes your right of way or so, and but also someone looks very pretty and someone smiles at you. We need these forms of interaction which are not predicted, controlled, right? Because in Zoom interaction, right, I think it's very interesting to think about the phenomenology of Zoom interaction. But one thing is we have very clear control of interaction. We can kind of find solutions or discuss stuff with each other. But you know, Hans Blumenberg, the German philosopher, says that culture, and I would also say individual culture, character, is developing out of the detours, right? Out of the routes which were not expected, out of the myriad of small interactions. And I believe if those interactions are kind of missing, like we are missing them right now, then something very strange happens. It's not even that we miss so much the others. A lot of people report that now, even when they have the chance to call a friend or so, or even to meet a friend for a walk or so, they no longer have the desire, right? I find this very interesting. It seems that existential, so to speak, interaction or interaction is needed existentially in order to feel alive and vibrant. But there's one more aspect on this biographical side, which I discuss in the book, which I found very interesting, because when you look at young people, once they get to the high school diploma, right, that is a very interesting point in life, because normally when you're a small child or a school kid, you don't really have much choice. The world is not terribly disposable to you, right? You have to go to school. You are forced by law and by your parents, and the teacher tells you what to do, and your family, mother and father, tell you how to live, basically, right? And then you get to the point of the high school diploma where you might leave home. And then all of a sudden the world becomes, that's at least what the grown-ups tell you, available, attainable, accessible. And we tend to think of this in retrospect as the happiest moment of our lives, right? Everything was open, the world was up for grabs. But actually, young people, when you talk to them, they feel this, they interpret this, they experience it as a terrible moment. They are really frightened, right? And why is it? Because of because they experience monstrous uncontrollability. There are thousands, literally, I checked it for Germany, more than 19,000 different courses of study they can select. 19,000. So they always feel they certainly will not find the right one, right? And they cannot calculate what will be the result of studying whatever they want to study, right? What will be my way into life, right? So they see their life is not controllable. It's not predictable, right? They need a different approach to the world, which has to do with trust, right? With a sense of self-efficacy. I don't know where the route will take me. But what actually counselors tell them is you have to carefully select the right course of study. You have to carefully make the right choices about where to live and what to do with your life. And this is it's a monstrous situation for them. They become burned out very quickly, right? So I think when you think of biography, you see really what we do is we lose control over our lives, and also about partnership is another interesting case in point. People think I have to find the best partner. So they use, for example, online dating partnerships, right? Where the match should be perfect, that you don't waste time with the wrong people. And it doesn't really work out. I mean, it works out for one night stands, but not really very well for But sometimes it does, but very often it does not, right? So I think you see this as an existential biographical dimension from birth to death, really. I also have a chapter on birth and a chapter on death. In both cases, we try to gain control over when a baby is born and what it should look like, for example, right? And so on, or whether it should not be born. And even we try to kind of get control over our death. We want to decide when to die and how to die and in which form to die and what rights we have and what will come after our death. And by this way, we do not gain life, we seem to lose it. At least that's what I try to say in my book.
En aquest sentit, ara parlàvem d'aquest imperatiu d'optimització, en aquest cas biogràfic, respecte dels estudis o inclús de trobar la parella, i un dels elements que també apareix en el llibre i que em sembla interessant i que volia comentar una mica és com això ha passat gairebé fins i tot, per dir-ho així, del pla existencial que comentaves a un pla, per utilitzar la paraula, biopolític, que és les noves tecnologies, les plataformes digitals, han permès portar aquesta autooptimització del subjecte a un punt insospitat fa uns anys, per dir-ho així, en el qual tenim aplicacions per mesurar els passos que fem al dia, la pressió sanguínia, la melatonina, les fases del son, quan arribem a la fase REM i quan no. És a dir, una sèrie d'instruments tècnics que ens permeten aprofundir molt més en aquesta autooptimització. I abans, que d'alguna manera discutíem si era pròpiament modern o era més antic, per dir-ho així, o havíem de remuntar més endarrere, aquest impuls de creixement respecte d'aquesta autooptimització. No sé si creieu o penseu que les tecnologies digitals han fet, per dir-ho així, un salt espacial o han jugat un paper diferencial que no havia passat, per dir-ho així, en un període de fa 100 anys o molt més endarrere, que per més que aquest impuls de creixement ja hi fos, que hi ha hagut aquest canvi, per dir-ho així, biopolític. No sé si estaríeu d'acord, si no.
Sí, absolutament. Les xarxes socials i totes les plataformes tecnològiques han estat crítiques en la posada a disposició del subjecte, en com aquesta pressió l'hem assumida en tant que cos i en tant que esperit. Jo crec que aquesta és la dimensió més angoixant de totes. O sigui, les diferents dimensions que retrata el professor Rosa són totes bastant angoixants, però per mi la més angoixant és aquesta. I jo crec que es veu molt palesa en els joves, no només els joves que estan a punt d'escollir quina carrera faran, sinó els joves que estan a punt d'acabar la universitat, que són també, per tant, generacions que han patit molt la influència de les xarxes socials i que estan constantment exposats i que la seva vida té molt a veure és gairebé una xarxa social en si mateixa, i són joves que estan profundament angoixats perquè suposadament poden fer el que vulguin i suposadament el missatge que reben és ho tens tot a disposició, només et cal triar i si no ho fas bé, a més serà culpa teva perquè ho podies fer tot. Però esclar, és absolutament fals, no és cert que ho puguem fer tot, no és cert que tot el que veiem sigui de debò accessible a tots plegats, i no és cert que les vides que veiem a les xarxes socials mostrin tota la cara d'una vida. I jo crec que en essència aquesta panaccessibilitat, aquest poder accedir a tot, el que ha fet i que veiem de manera molt clara en aquests joves, ja sigui quan han de triar el que estudien com quan estan a punt d'accedir al mercat laboral i han de triar qui volen ser, aquesta idea de qui vol ser, el problema és que el fet de suposadament tenir-ho tot accessible ha matat la seva capacitat de desitjar. El desig al final s'alimenta ja ho deia el professor Rosa, s'alimenta de la semidisponibilitat, s'alimenta del crec que puc accedir a tu però en realitat no i haig de fer un esforç. S'alimenta d'aquest sí però no i en canvi les xarxes socials i això, l'epifenomen per mi serien aquests joves en aquestes situacions, clar, suposadament estan en un context d'abundància i no hem d'oblidar que Eros és fill de Poros i de Penia, és fill de l'abundància i de la indigència, de la necessitat. Llavors, esclar, els diem què vols? Què vols fer? Ho pots fer tot, què vols? Però és que no saben què volen, perquè és que com podem saber què volem si no estem connectats amb el propi desig? Perquè al final la voluntat ha d'estar nodrida pel desig, i si no ho està, com bé diu en aquest llibre el professor Rosa, si la voluntat no està nodrida pel desig, llavors som incapaços de ressonar amb res, perquè tot és fruit d'una obligació gairebé. Per tant, sí, tornant a la pregunta original, sí que crec que la dimensió tecnològica i les xarxes socials són terribles a nivell del subjecte en aquest sentit, perquè ens estan matant el desig i o hauríem de ser éssers constituïts pel desig. Sense desig és que no sabem on volem anar.
A mi m'agradaria, jo no sabria respondre si sí o si no, perquè no sabria en què basar-me per respondre. La intuïció la comparteixo, però per tal sí que m'agradaria que el professor Rosa si podria especificar una mica més quina seria la seva posició sobre això, perquè d'una banda, òbviament jo penso també que s'ha de mirar els nens i els més joves, i quan diem que són nadius digitals crec que estem dient que per ells, òbviament, la possibilitat de la ressonància no està a darrere, com diríem així, que és una mica la sensació que jo tinc quan llegim aquest llibre, la ressonància ja ha passat. I ara cal reconstruir-la en unes condicions desfavorables, diguem-ne. Aleshores, però en canvi, per algú que ho ha viscut sempre i que confia en què a través de les xarxes socials, a través de la tecnologia, establir també el que podríem anomenar amb aquest concepte tan útil que ens proporciona, establir relacions de ressonància. Òbviament mantenen aquesta esperança. Però què corre a la xarxa? Què corre per internet? Doncs el que corre és la relació no ressonant per antonomàsia, que és la pornografia, que és el que més ocupa i que també es troba en els dispositius electrònics dels nens des de molt petits, perquè això sí que es mou lliurement i és absolutament disponible i gratis, a més, i hi ha molt interès en què es consumeixi. Però d'altra banda, veiem, jo he llegit alguns articles en què es veu que les relacions matrimonials o les relacions que s'han establert a través de xarxes socials, a través d'aquestes aplicacions, ara no me'n recordo, Tinder, això, sembla ser que s'està comprovant que poden durar bastant, també. Sembla ser que seria un bon procediment per trobar-se gent. En definitiva, el que li voldria preguntar al professor és si hi ha elements tecnopessimistes en la seva proposta, si podries veure's com una proposta essencialment tecnopessimista, si per tant creu que hi ha, o si en canvi considera que hi hauria usos ressonants de la tecnologia, hi hauria una possibilitat de relacionar-nos de manera emancipatòria amb aquests mitjans.
Thanks a lot there are lots of interesting ideas now on the table. I mean, I think when we discuss technology, there is really it's very strange. You have the techno-optimists, which always claim that with all these technologies, we now finally have exactly the axis of resonance we need, right? I can talk to those people I want to, or to people who somehow understand me and are like me, right? Which is true. And if you think of our situation right now, you do see, I mean, it's only with the help of technology that we can resonate in dialogue, at least to some extent, which is, of course, a good thing. And if your child, for example, is in Japan right now, it's only through technology that you can resonate. But there are those who always insist on the chances, the opportunities, the capacities, let's say, for resonance. And then there are the others who always insist on the dangers and the pitfalls and so on. And I think we really need to overcome this dichotomy. I think there are potentialities for resonance in technology, and there are dangers to it, and we need to understand it and to look at it carefully. And my hunch is, my belief is, that under present conditions, of course, capitalism has to be brought in at one point, right? Under conditions of dynamic stabilization, I believe technology becomes a tool of killing resonance, right? Not necessarily and by itself, but under these contexts where you are forced to permanently optimize, then of course technology very quickly becomes a tool in this, which is rather than killing resonances. I mean, there are a number of points you've made, which I would actually like to go to. I mean, look, I talked about capitalism, for example, or about dynamic stabilization, you could say. I think what this leads to, and here digitalization plays a huge role, or technology, is it really it leads to the necessity for what I call parametric optimization, right? My idea is this, that nowadays in all fields of our existence, we make things first, it's always a three-step process. We make processes or capacities or a status visible. For example, nobody ever thought of measuring the number of steps taken per day, right? Now my iPhone does it by itself, right? And once I discovered it, I got almost addicted to it. It's very interesting to see how many steps did I take per day, right? And there is there are more and more parameters. You talked about biopolitics, right? About my body, which the machines make visible in the first place. For example, the blood pressure is not new, right? Body mass index is semi-new. But now the new smartphone, it's very interesting. I had an exchange with my nephew who is 18, right? And he said, oh, I need to get he said, I should get the new Apple smartphone. And I said, so why? He said, oh, it measures the oxygen level in your blood. So I said, I never was interested in the oxygen level in my blood. And then he said, yeah, but it's important, right? He thinks I'm irresponsible because if I knew the oxygen level in my blood, I could recognize if I got COVID-19 or if I am close to a heart attack or if I have a brain, how do you call this, a Schlaganfall, a brain disease, right? So right now we don't measure it, but I believe in a few years everybody will feel, yes, I should really know the oxygen level in my blood. And of course there are incredible amount of other digits, right? Numbers we tend to know about our lives. How many friends do you have on Facebook? How many steps do you make per day? How was your sleep? Did you have the right amount of it? How many calories is your intake? How many calories is your outtake when you go in a fitness studio or in the gym or something of that sort? And so in social relations, in your body, in our body, but in all activities, there are more and more parameters made visible. Of course, particularly so in work too, right? How was your input and your output? For example, if I'm a scientist, how are my publications? What is my impact factor? What is my ranking in the evaluation? How is my university ranked? How much third party funding money did I create, and so on? But it's even with students, right? They have all forms of parameters. So the first step is make it visible. And then the second step is make it comparable. I have 10,000 steps per day. What's your number, right? Is it higher or lower? What should it be? There always comes normalization into it, because some experts will tell you have to have 10,000 steps per day and you have to have that body mass index and that size of your body and so on, and that oxygen level and that, as you said, so and 500 friends is the average on Facebook. Then people think, oh, I might be non-social or so, and so on. And so the first step is make it visible. The second is make it comparable. And then the third is make it optimizable, right? You try to optimize it. I have to work on my steps. I have to work on my relaxation. I have to work on my calorie intake. I have to work on my calorie outtake, so to speak, or on my yoga courses and so on. You even see it. I found this, and my claim is that once you have these numbers, in work or in life or in social status or wherever it is, it's very hard to not compare and to not work on them. And this, of course, is against the resonant relationship which is always open for grasp, where you have a sense of a relationship, but not control over the parameters. And I think you are in Barcelona, which is a great city for soccer. And I really want to do a study on football, right? Because there you see the same development. Nowadays they have all these statistics, right? How many passes did a player make? What was his fastest run, right? What was his average speed? How much did he walk? How many of his passes did find the next player, right? How many attempts at shooting at the goal did he have? And so on. There's an incredible number of parameters which we now measure, compare, and try to improve. And thereby, I really believe we lose our capacity. I think actually, I think soccer players become worse instead of better, but this I cannot prove. I want to make one final thing about the digital natives, about the hope or the loss, or maybe two. One is the loss of desire. I really believe I really believe this culture it lives by a loss of desire, right? Because when you desire something, you have either, you either make it, you buy it, or you are so far from having the capacity of buying it that you lose the attractivity of it too. And then it's your own fault. It's not that you struggle with a world which is semi-accessible, right? You either can buy it or you can't, right? But the thing is with pornography, which you mentioned, the interesting thing is the fact that you can have all forms of sex easily available is not increasing sexual desire. All the studies, all the data I know of is that young persons have less sex. They start later with their sexual life. Their sexual activities are less high on their list of importance in their lives, right? So the fact, you think of our own youth, sex was always the somehow forbidden thing. It was not available. You had to somehow be very careful and take a high risk to get one of these magazines or so with nude women. So it was kind of always in this shady area. This is what creates desire. Once it's open on the table, right, it actually has the opposite effect. But when you look at young people right now, I find something very interesting, because we thought at the beginning of the COVID crisis that the digital natives will be very easy and happy with having digital conversations, Zoom webinars or Zoom conferences and so on. But the older people like me or the professors, they will have a hard time. And the fact is that it's the other way around. Right? Actually, the professors have adapted quite quickly to it, right? Actually, they found out it's quite nice to sit at home. I don't have to move to Jena, which is quite far away from where I'm right now. I can do it at home, right? I'll just deliver my lecture on the camera, and then I say bye-bye. That's perfect. And the students really suffer. And it's not just that they suffer, they insist on us being there physically present. This does not surprise me, right? Because I believe the need for resonance is it's an existential necessity. And young people, they are resonant beings. Even the children, the newborn ones, they want to be in resonance. They need resonance of the mother or the father or the carer. But students and even high school students, they need the dense interaction and resonance. You might not need it once you're 60 and you are settled in the world, right? But this is why I believe we're not beyond the age of resonance. Resonance is an existential necessity, and it will find new forms, or it will lead to monstrous frustrations and therefore to maybe new forms of social unrest.
Un dels temes que, clar, que està sortint aquí és respecte a aquesta optimització paramètrica. D'alguna manera és com hi podem plantar cara d'alguna manera a través d'aquest concepte de ressonància que ha anat sortint, que fins ara ens hem mogut en un pla, per dir-ho així, existencial o gairebé més, no sé si dir-ne metafísic, però sí, per dir-ho així, en un pla més abstracte. I la meva pregunta, la que volia llançar-li al professor Rosa, però també vosaltres, era com pensàveu que podíem, per dir-ho així, traduir aquest concepte de ressonància a la pràctica, és a dir, en tant que ja que el problema d'acceleració de les societats i d'articulació de l'imperatiu de creixement, per dir-ho així, és una qüestió política i econòmica lligada a les societats tardomodernes i a un sistema econòmic molt concret, com podem, per dir-ho així, perseguir aquesta ressonància en termes polítics? Si és que és possible, o si, com per la pròpia definició, que això és una cosa que treballa molt bé el professor Rosa en el llibre, és que precisament la ressonància no és quelcom que podem buscar directament, que sempre l'hem de buscar, per dir-ho així, a través de mètodes indirectes o d'aquesta semidisponibilitat. Però de tota manera em preguntava això, si hi havia alguna possibilitat o imaginàveu alguna manera o alguna pràctica que sí que ens pogués acostar a aquesta ressonància, per dir-ho així, en termes de pràctica política d'aquest tipus.
Vols que contesti ell primer?
Sí, o com vulgueu.
Sí.
I can go, but I don't want to always have a monopole, right? Because I also like to hear the others, but I'll try to do it very quickly. The political question is very important. I think it is, as you say, we cannot manufacture resonance, right? It cannot be made disponible in the sense of, oh, tonight at 8 I will be in resonance. We try this. We put resonance in an oasis, right? So I work hard all day. I'm out of resonance. I'm in a mode of what I call actually alienation or silent relationships. And then I want to be in the concert hall or in the church or in the forest and want to be in resonance. It does not work, right? So we cannot manufacture it. We cannot even manufacture it politically, but we can look at the contexts in which resonance becomes a possibility. And there you really see, for example, when you're under time pressure, right? Then it's very unlikely you get in resonance. I always make this argument. If I have to catch the plane at the airport, I cannot get in resonance with anyone, not with the sunset, not with the music or the cat or the little child approaching me, because I have to be fast. And in an acceleration society, in a society driven by the logic of the financial markets, time scarcity becomes our everyday habitus. Please leave me alone. I have to get all of this done. Yes, it's nice that my son gets his high school diploma, but I don't have the time to celebrate or so, right? You see that competition, fear, and time scarcity are killers of resonance, right? So actually it becomes quite easy to see what we do. We don't need more and more competition. We need less competition, and we need political instruments to preserve kind of things like the Sunday, for example, right? Or just times off, where I do not have to individually decide, tonight I will not open the email, because I know if I do not open the email, tomorrow I will have a long list of I have to work faster. But if we all abstain from buying and work, for example, from consumption and production on Sunday, we'd create a little niche for possible resonance. But then there is also one more something I'm working on now, and I found very important. You asked, I think, I'm not sure exactly what you asked in the beginning, but the question is, how do we know what resonance is, or how do we find it? And I'd like to come back for a moment at playing soccer, right? I think when a soccer player knows when it was a good game, and even if he played well or not. And then he compare it to the parameters, right? How fast did you run? How many passes did you play? And so on. And there you see a kind of gap. Right. I like to refer to Leonard Cohen there. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light comes in. And I would say this is how the political power comes in to change our world, because in all our interactions, there is a potential for resonance. Even in a conversation like this, right? There is the potential to really get into a resonating dialogue. And we know whether it was one or not, right? And then there are the parameters of what all the arguments I have to say, or how I have to win the dialogue, or whatever it is. And so there is a crack between a logic of optimization and the logic of resonance. And it's the same in all institutions. In education, a teacher knows what was a good hour, a good lesson, right? A good conversation with his children. And it's different from having the best result in the PISA study or so, right? And it's the same in the healthcare system. This afternoon, I talked to doctors, right? They know what is the difference between being a good doctor and between satisfying all the criteria, economic and by parametric optimization. And it's the same for a farmer. He knows what is a good way of interacting with the plants and the animals, and he knows what is the optimum to get in economic terms. So I think we should look at those cracks between a relationship of resonance and experience of resonance and parametric optimization, and then we should insist on the institutions which enable and further resonance instead of forcing us to optimize.
Sí, jo també comparteixo la idea que que la potencialitat de la resonància hi és a tot arreu, i que potser la clau, la condició de possibilitat perquè es doni, sense que en puguem tenir mai ni receptes ni fórmules màgiques, perquè precisament consisteix en això, en una cosa que és inefable, indefinible, però sí que potser una condició de possibilitat és no deixar-nos moure per les pulsions que dèiem de l'home de Hobbes, és a dir, que té a veure amb el que deia ara el professor, no deixar-nos moure per la competència, sinó entendre que l'altre o les altres coses són coses que em poden nodrir i em poden aportar i em poden transformar. No deixar-nos endur per la desconfiança, sinó confiar. O sigui, la ressonància pot sorgir a partir del confiar en el món, perquè el confiar en el món és el que permet que jo m'obri i que pugui ser transformat. Si desconfio, em tanco, em quedo rígid i no puc arribar a ressonar. I és també d'alguna manera deixar, potser, no sé si abandonar la ciència i la tècnica, però sí com a mínim tenir una mirada poètica del món en certs moments. Però és clar, la dificultat és que tot això fa por. Llegint el llibre m'han vingut dues anècdotes que he viscut darrerament. Una, el llibre comença parlant de la neu com metàfora de la indisponibilitat. I justament fa un parell de setmanes, o un pèl més, vaig portar la meva filla de 2 anys a descobrir la neu per primera vegada i l'únic que li preocupava era fer un ninot de neu. Estava obsessionada en fer un ninot de neu. No volia res més amb la neu que fer un ninot de neu. I esclar, què estava fent ella amb allò inefable? N'estava fent una figura humana. Necessitava fer-ne un objecte intel·ligible, que li parlés, una figura humana, que és el que ella coneix, el que coneixem com a éssers humans. Perquè, esclar, el món fa por. I poc després estàvem parlant amb un pastor d'ovelles, parlant de la por amb un pastor d'ovelles, que porta 5 anys buscant els llops. Resulta que han aparegut llops a la vora de Sant Llorenç de Morunys que estan matant a totes les ovelles. I llavors porten 5 anys intentant trobar aquests llops i no hi ha manera de trobar-los i de matar-los. I esclar, de sobte és... Clar, aquesta por dels nens que tenen por als llops i que volen fer ninots de neu amb la neu és una por que és real. O sigui, hi ha aquest pastor que té por dels llops. O sigui, això no són només contes, és que les pors veuen de coses que han passat al llarg de la història. Llavors, aquesta idea de la necessitat de confiar per poder ressonar no és senzilla. I jo crec que cal poesia, cal misticisme, cal llegir, l'altre dia que deies que estàs llegint a Simone Weil, cal llegir a Simone Weil i recuperar la idea del sagrat, o potser un vers d'un poema que em venia també llegint el llibre del professor Rosa, era un vers del Francesc Garriga, del poemari Setembre, on diu enmig d'un poema «I fem un te per esperar el miracle». I pensava, és això. Clar, poder ressonar és això, és fer un te per esperar el miracle. Però clar, no som capaços de fer-ho tota l'estona.
A mi em sembla especialment interessant el fet que en el centre del projecte del professor Rosa hi ha concretament a la pàgina 146, diu en algun moment no estic segur de què va aquest llibre, és òbviament sí que ho sap, però ja tu has utilitzat el terme l'inefable, en el centre hi ha la ressonància, que és un concepte que ens ressona, o sigui, que d'alguna manera sabem de què està parlant, però és clarament una metàfora. I a mi també m'agradaria saber, vull dir, sé que ha escrit un llibre de 800 pàgines on explica molt més àmpliament, però m'agradaria veure si pogués també dir si és una metàfora, de què és una metàfora. No sempre totes les metàfores són d'alguna cosa, però què estaria designant, si pot encara anar més enllà, perquè quan en el llibre el que veiem són una sèrie d'adjectius vinculats a l'absència de ressonància, quan parla que l'exterior és mort, és gris, fred, buit, i en l'interior nosaltres ens sentim muts i sords. Clar, sembla com... De vegades penses en ressonància i diu per què no ha utilitzat el concepte de felicitat, que seria el concepte tradicional filosòfic, potser per parlar o de relació feliç, o de relació exitosa, relació reeixida. I en algun moment parla d'experiència veritable, experiència vertadera també, per designar-ho. M'agradaria saber per què no... sigui, perquè ens trobem molt a prop també de qüestions, podríem parlar fins i tot religioses, no? El concepte de plenitud és un concepte que està vinculat amb l'experiència religiosa. Bé, a veure si té alguna cosa a dir. Bueno, m'agradaria, si pogués anar una mica més enllà, no? Perquè és interessant estar treballant amb un llibre, amb una expressió al centre de la qual, al final, per entendre'l, hem d'estar apel·lant els uns als altres a experiències que hem tingut i que tenim constantment. I ell ho diu, no? Els metges saben identificar quan una cosa és... quan estan fent bé les coses i quan no. I pel que fa, em sembla fantàstica l'expressió de l'optimització paramètrica, no? Que és qualsevol persona que és responsable d'alguna institució, no? A la universitat, per exemple, quan fas treball administratiu, és un treball en el qual actualment, en situació de crisi, com a mínim a les nostres universitats o com a mínim a la meva, és optimització paramètrica. Optimització paramètrica què vol dir? Que no pots fer res que no estigui en un Excel, no? Un Excel que tu no controles i que t'arriba i que tampoc no entens, en realitat. O sigui, pots arribar a entendre, però l'estona que et dura entendre allò doncs és relativament poca, bàsicament perquè no pots entrar en ressonància amb aquell Excel, perquè són uns números que no... Sí que hi ha números que fan il·lusió, però hi ha números que són una gàbia, no? que t'obliguen a passar per allà dintre i que et treuen tota la iniciativa perquè estàs atrapat en la burocràcia. Diguem una cosa que ja deia Weber, no? També.
Si el professor vol contestar ràpidament a la qüestió sobre la ressonància, i després passarem a les preguntes del públic, que queden ja només 15 minutets, i seguim.
I'd love to. I'll be really short because I'd love to talk to the audience also. I just want to say something about, for why this line in the book that I don't know what the book is about, it got me in a lot of trouble. What I meant is what Adorno says about the non-identical. I meant the idea that you have to experience something which you cannot control means that you also cannot control it conceptually. You cannot define it very clearly and then make it available or accessible. And I don't want to talk about happiness because happiness is a subjective state. I am happy. Resonance is a relationship. I am in a process, in a relationship with someone. And in German, I use the term gelingend, eine gelingendes Leben, and it's a kind of a good life. And in English, they translated it a successful life. And I hate the term success because that's the output, it's the outcome. But resonance is not about the outcome of something, it's a process, right? It's a dynamic interaction between two things. This is why resonance cannot easily be brought in any of these things, but it's not just a metaphor, it's a form of relationship with those four elements: being touched, reaching out, being self-efficacious and answering, then being transformed, and it's non-controllable. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Gràcies. Doncs no sé si hi ha alguna pregunta aquí online, em penso que sí, que per aquí n'hi ha alguna. No veig gaire res més amb els focus, però... El micro? Allà, no? Sí.
Hi everybody. So I'll write my question in English, if you don't bother. To me, the idea of resonance is very inspiring and exciting. However, connecting with the objects, people, nature, and other beings does not seem that easy to carry out. Reasoning appears to be not an option, but a privilege only available for wealthy or cosmic contemplative people who have time for such sonority. My question is an accelerated and busy and overwhelming life, how do we ordinary mortal people not alienate and shift to resonance? Furthermore, having read your latest works, I noticed that you theorized acceleration and alienation first, then you presented resonance as an answer to the problem. My question is, what will be your next contribution?
Thank you for these two questions very much. I mean, I would like to say to insist, because it's a very important question, or it's an important and interesting question. But I insist that resonance is not a kind of luxury thing that you can have once you are very learned or very rich or so, or if you have a lot of free time. For me, it's very important to say no. Resonance is the most elementary form of relating to the world. As I think I said earlier, the newborn baby, right? He needs or she needs to get in resonance, and children know what resonance is, and poor people do know, right? And even if you talk to homeless people living in the street, it's very touching. Actually, I really tried hard, because I think a concept has to convince or to make sense from all segments of society, right? And it's very important if you talk to people, let's say like homeless people are very disprivileged people. I've also talked to waste pickers in Brazil, right? And the thing is, they know exactly what resonance is about. They tell you the worst thing about being homeless in the street, for example, or being a beggar, is that others treat you like you're a stone or you're a bag of garbage. The lack of resonance is very bad. And even more than this, not being fed, right? Not getting food or clothing is experienced as a kind of form of alienation. The world is hostile to me. It's indifferent to me. This is why, for me, it's very, very important to understand that resonance is not a luxury thing. It's an essential necessity, and we know it because we are human beings, but we can dislearn it. We can forget about it in a competitive parametric game of optimization, right? So this is number one. And the other question is very interesting, right? I'm working, and this has partially been inspired by the COVID crisis. I want to develop a conception of social energy. I really realize we have physical energy, right? But conceptions, but we don't have a concept of social energy, right? Because sometimes we say I'm full of energy, or a discussion is full of energy. What does that mean, right? And then you normally turn to psychology, and they talk about a kind of psychological energy. But I believe energy is not just a subjective thing. It's an interactional thing in a social movement or in a group of people, or there might be energy, political energy, or I get my individual energy out of social interaction. There is Randall Collins, for example, a sociologist who has developed this concept as emotional energy very much, because my observation was that it seems like COVID is killing our social energy, right? People sit at home and feel, I'm totally drained, right? I'm like living in a kind of in a shielded away from society. So I believe my next book will be on social energy, with the idea that it's not something just in me, and it's not just physical, but it's something in between. And that might help us to get out of a situation in which I'm either totally active or totally passive. So I want to use it as a way out of the impasse between total control and total powerlessness.
Allà em penso que hi ha una altra pregunta.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. I thought it was very interesting. And at the beginning you mentioned, I don't know if this was your intent, but the words available, attainable, and accessible. And my understanding is that you mentioned those three because you think in a way they're synonyms. And trying to reflect on those words, I was thinking that for me, accessible and available, in a way, their meaning opposes each other, because as far as I see it, nowadays you can be really available, but you can have your access to yourself maybe really restricted. So I was thinking, if in your book, maybe I haven't read it, perhaps you develop this farther, but how do you compare those? And do you think accessible and available could also at the same time mean contradictory things? And then just a very short question in terms of resonance. I wondered, because I've been studying about Asian scholars, and the term resonance comes a lot, especially when you look into Taoism and Confucius, and I was wondering whether you got that from theirs or you developed it on your own, or yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. These are also two very interesting questions. Actually, I did not develop it from Taoism, but I realized after having written the book that is very interesting. Also, actually, the question about social energy, right? The interesting thing is that all the other cultures have conceptions of social energy. I mean, think of Greek philosophy, right, with energeia and dynamis, dynamics, right, coming out of Greeks, but also the resonance conception. I've learned it. I did not develop it from there, but I learned that it's very interesting to look at it through a Taoist, let's say Taoist or Chinese culture and Taoist perspective. I'm trying to expand my horizon there. Actually, I also try to expand it because I've developed a conception, we did not talk about it today, of, when you look at it linguistically, we are either in our languages, Spanish, English, French, German, we are either active, I do something, or I'm passive, something is done to me. But I'm looking for something in between. I think, the moments of happiness, so to speak, the moments of resonance is a state where I cannot say, am I the doer or the done to, as Jessica Benjamin calls it, right? It's something in between. The dance is dancing the dancers, right? And these are ideas which Japanese or Chinese language and philosophy have actually very interesting things to offer. So I'm very open to this, but I did not develop it from there. The other observation you make is very right and very good. The problem is I use one German term, right? Unverfügbarkeit, Verfügbarkeit, Unverfügbarkeit, and it's kind of impossible to translate it. And because I could, and in Spanish it's now translated into lo disponible e lo indisponible, I believe, because unfortunately I'm very sorry I don't speak Spanish, right? But it played, the whole book is about, I think, what you got at, what you hinted at with your question, that there are different forms of being available. For example, I'm available on the phone, but that does not mean that I'm accessible, or however you call it, right? That I'm touchable by the exchange. So I always play, and you also in the discussion earlier, you mentioned this difference between different forms of being. I forgot what it was, but different, semi availability, right, or the semi disponibility, right? The whole book is about this, right? What is the difference between access, availability, attainability? And the basic idea is that there is a difference between, look at parents, for example. I think they must be accessible for their kids, but not controllable. So if the kid calls, the mother or the father, the parents should hear it, right? But it doesn't mean that the kid always gets what it wants. It might not even always get a response, right? So it's a kind of semi-controllable or semi-disposable relationship. And I'm looking into this because I believe happiness, so to speak, and desire, and the way out of our current impasse is that we get away from a conception of having complete control towards a conception of being in a kind of reachable, so to speak, but not controllable.
Doncs moltes gràcies. Crec que ho hem de deixar aquí perquè tenim una indisponibilitat molt gran que té a veure amb el toc de queda i totes les restriccions i, per tant, no podem ampliar les preguntes. Per tant, moltes gràcies al professor Rosa, moltes gràcies al Daniel Gamper i a la Sira Abenoza i moltes gràcies a tothom per venir.
A vosaltres.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. From my side, it was very interesting, and I really hope to have the chance to come to the CCCB as soon as possible, right? And thank you very much for your very interesting thoughts. I learned a lot from what you said about the book and from your experiences with it. So thanks a lot, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.